To reiterate or say again, the chemtrails are half of a two-part global genocide system. Genocide will be done with germs, bacteria, viruses, any combination of the above. It's been found in military research that the ideal scenario is a virus, which is pretty bad. In the presence of another organism, a certain kind of fungus becomes much more virulent, becomes a killer. So what this is a preparation for spraying the virus, which under normal circumstances wouldn't kill you. One of the more unusual ingredients in the chemtrail is a freeze-dried human blood cell. And apparently it's perfect, so it's not natural. It was manufactured in a lab and then freeze-dried. And it's small enough to breathe in. And from my medical research, I found something called the pleomorphic theory of disease, which in simple terms is there are very small organisms, 10% the size of bacteria and viruses, called the pleomorphs. There's 16 different variations of the same animal, depending on the pH in the blood. And one of them, interestingly enough, is a human blood cell-like form, which is quite surprising to the people who study this. They find a small pathogenic organism turning into a blood cell. So I would say that the freeze-dried human blood cell found in the chemtrails is something that was made in a lab, and it's able to change out of the human blood cell configuration back into a fungus or a mold. And this is the fungus or mold that would be the partner to the sprayed genetically developed virus, which is probably the same old virus they've always been using from the sheep Vishnu virus modified into Lyme disease and other things like that. What happens why you die when you get really sick is in the lungs there's so much antiviral activity, enzyme activity, that it actually dissolves the flesh in the bottom third of the lungs, and you bleed to death or suffocate in blood foam. And the metallic components, the nanometal particles in the chemtrails, are designed to assist with the slicing up of the cells in the bottom of your lungs. So what you're seeing there is the preparation for a worldwide genocide. And the question, what about the people who are doing this and their children? Aren't they going to be affected too? Is not really relevant. Obviously, they're prepared in some way, or they wouldn't be doing this. No one's been able to get an answer from anyone as to what and why the chemtrails. It's going on virtually everywhere. And it's been going on since 1964-65. I became aware of them then. I didn't know what they were, but I knew what they were doing, which is obscuring the skies and then creating that gray overcast. So the psychopathic component of humanity is planning to dispose of the rest of us and walk into the future with all of the technology that we spent the last 2,000 years developing. This weekend, which is approximately June 10th, 2013, the Bilderberg secret meeting is being held in Westbury, just outside of London, and a few thousand people, and Alex Jones and David Icke turned up to protest. And for 2 days I've been asking everyone I've run into, have you ever heard of the Bilderberg group? And nobody has heard of it. So, although it's gone from absolute secrecy to a few thousand protesters, it hasn't gone worldwide, and they are just the tip of the iceberg of evil. They're price fixing things for the next year. I did some research into the formula in the chemtrails, and it's all bad. There's a couple of molds and funguses. There's the little red blood cell. There's nanoparticles of aluminum. There's barium and boron, which are bad for you. There's some radioactive waste, strontium-90 and things. And there's one other ingredient, which is something that's very, very dry, which is used to keep it in powder form. And I couldn't find out what it was. I have the name of it. You can't find this thing listed anywhere. The Poison Control Center didn't know what it was, and you have to pay $35 to join a chemical wholesale sign-up board to be able to get a gauge on what this thing is. So it's pretty bad, whatever it is. And if that is in the lungs as well as everything else, it's probably pretty bad for the body. It may even be the cause of the little funny symmetrical crystals that are coming out of people who have Morgellons. So it is happening almost every day, almost everywhere. And the only place you'll hear this kind of concept is in Ron Hubbard's old science fiction book. I think it's called Battlefield Earth, where the aliens put up poison gas drones, many of them flying around and around the planet, and poisoned everybody. There didn't even have to be a fight. So That's probably where the idea came from. Well, something needs to be done about this. It's happening to the 99% of it from the 1% of psychotic beings who wish to inherit the planet. Now, when this happens, it's going to be very, very fast. They tested this out in Poland a couple of years ago, and it didn't go as well as expected. They didn't get the kill percentage they wanted, and people were... took them maybe 7 days to die. The SARS virus, which got loose in Canada a few years back, is almost a 3-day beginning to end death. If it happens on a massive scale, people will be trying to cure themselves, or going to the pharmacy, or going to their doctor and trying to get antibiotics. There'll be so many sick people, there will not be services for you. They'll run out of antibiotics. They'll run out of the special antibiotics that the government keeps stockpiled. And then there'll be nothing. So what you're going to do when Hulkamania runs wild on you? One of the things that opens the door here is a phrase which is, we have only this brief moment in eternity to attain our freedom. Cultures always go this way when they get to the level we're at, where we're able to have surveillance, or a space culture always, because the technology becomes so huge, the individual becomes nothing but a number. And when you do that, that's the end of creativity. Creativity is always done by enthusiastic individuals, and when the individual stops creating, the power base of the civilization becomes static and will degrade, and because the people have no power, they are forced to become criminal, and that just speeds up the demise of the culture. So there is no hope for a clearly defined, electronically babysat culture. You can't control man or individual men or women because they don't want to be controlled. People have their own desires and things that they want to do, and that does not include being someone else's slave. And the idea of by force or by religion having other people's accumulated energies coming your way is unethical, and will never work out. So at this point in time, we're floundering around and grabbing for straws. Someone needs to come up with a new paradigm for a civilization where we cooperate and pool rather than split it into haves and have-nots. This is a problem of havingness. Some people have nothing, and some people have to have a castle in Switzerland and 20 cars, and $33 billion in the bank. And I don't think they attain happiness that way. They think they might, but maybe not. It's the journey that provides happiness, and interest is the key to that. This is the definition of happiness. Happiness is not itself an emotion. It is a word which states a condition, and the anatomy of that condition is interest. Happiness, you could say, is the overcoming of not unknowable obstacles towards a known goal. And I think the general public's been driven into an apathy about attaining happiness. Well, the people who accumulate wealth and power are not in apathy about that, but there's seemingly no end to that. And it's gotten to where the class that does that kind of accumulating is full of psychotics and psychopaths. And they're interfering with the rest of us, playing our game of pursuing our own happiness. And therefore, isn't it interesting that the United States original paperwork includes the section which is people have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And what's that doing in a legal document if it's not really, really important?